16 disappointing WWE wrestlers from 1990 onwards. Number 16, Carrie Von Erich, 1992. The Von Erichs are one of wrestling's first families, with a dozen members representing the family inside the squared circle. But out of this dirty dozen, only Carrie Von Erich ever competed in the WWF, though he wrestled as the Texas Tornado when he debuted in 1990. A fan favorite from his first match, Carrie was quickly pushed and won the Intercontinental Championship just a month after his debut, defeating the long-established Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam. Losing the title back to Perfect that December, the first half of 1991 would be great for Carrie, as he didn't suffer another pinfall loss until August 17th when he lost to the Warlord in Landover, Maryland, but this marked the beginning of the end. After this loss, Von Erich would feud with his NWA rival Ric Flair, with the Nature Boy almost always winning, and by the end of the year was jobber fodder to the recently debuted Undertaker. It's unclear why Von Erich's push was so suddenly ended, though we doubt a 2-month absence to deal with the breakdown of his marriage helped matters. Not only demoted to being a jobber, Carrie had major drug problems, which his father chose to ignore when he was the top star of WCCW, but Vince McMahon couldn't look past them. With his last appearance being a loss to Shawn Michaels on the July 26, 1992 edition of Primetime Wrestling, Von Erich would leave in August, and was replaced in his SummerSlam match against Papa Shango by El Matador, mere months before Von Erich's untimely passing, aged 33. Number 15, Scott Steiner, 2003. When Scott Steiner first appeared in the WWF in 1992, he was a clean-cut All-American babyface alongside his brother Rick. But when Steiner returned in November 2002, he was completely different, as fans had seen him become the muscle-bound, self-proclaimed Freakzilla in WCW. Given that Steiner dominated in WCW, proving himself to be a main eventer, Big Papa Pump was immediately put in a main event feud with then World Heavyweight Champion Triple H, though what fans received was an unmotivated, lazy Steiner, with his Royal Rumble 2003 match against The Game still being considered one of the worst world title matches to date. Refusing to give up on the Detroit native, the company gave him a rematch at the next month's No Way Out. But after another poor performance, the WWE were convinced not to give him a similar push to the one he got at the end of WCW. Tumbling down the card, Steiner's last match was the 2004 Royal Rumble, where he lasted 6 minutes, and after being released while out with an injury that August, fans never got to see Big Papa Pump live up to his potential. Number 14, Zack Ryder, 2012. In 2020, the WWE are all about social media, showcasing their content on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and plenty more sites. But in 2011, when Zack Ryder was getting himself over on his Z True Long Island Story YouTube show, the company didn't like that one bit, refusing to book Ryder despite his massive support from the fans that he'd accumulated 6 years after signing in 2005. At TLC 2011, though, the company seemingly had a change of heart, with Ryder winning the United States title in what should have been a storybook ending. Instead, the company quickly stripped everything from the woo-woo-woo superstar, having him lose the gold quickly before losing then-girlfriend Eve Torres, a breakup made even worse when Eve emasculated him at WrestleMania 28 in 2012. From there, the fall was quick for Ryder, who'd returned to being a jobber and barely used, and we can only imagine the executives backstage didn't like the idea of someone in the company getting over on their own. After a brief Raw tag title stint in 2019 with Kurt Hawkins, both were released as part of the April 15, 2020 cuts, and whilst Dabrowski has had work in AEW, he could have gone much further in WWE if properly booked. Number 13, Bad News Brown, 1990. Quite possibly the most disappointing wrestler of 1989 as well, Bad News Brown signed with the WWF in 1988, in what was a huge signing at the time. A judo bronze medalist at the 1976 Montreal Olympics, Brown became arguably a prototype Stone Cold Steve Austin, refusing to trust anyone, even his fellow heels, and after winning a WrestleMania 4 Battle Royal, enjoyed a brief feud with WWF champion Randy Savage in 1988. By 1990, though, Brown's star power had dropped significantly, with the Olympian entering a completely tone-deaf feud with Roddy Piper, which saw the Scotsman paint half his body black in what Brown has since described in interviews as racist. After failing to beat Piper at WrestleMania 6, Brown left the company in the summer of 1990, claiming Vince McMahon had broke his promise to make him the first black WWF champion, a promise that Kofi Kingston would fulfill 29 years later. Number 12. Bart Gunn, 1999. Bart Gunn was probably never going to be the next Triple H when he joined in 1993, but there's no denying his in-ring skill. Unfortunately, in 1999, the company completely ruined Gunn in just 35 seconds. After winning the Brawl for All shoot fighting tournament, which was WWF's answer to UFC, Gunn could have become a huge star. All he had to do was defeat Eric Butterbean Esch at WrestleMania 15. Instead, Butterbean, the legitimate fighter, completely destroyed Gunn, knocking him out in just over half a minute, completely destroying all tough guy cred that Gunn had built. In the years since, it's been speculated that the entire Brawl for All tournament was created to push Dr. Death Steve Williams, who was meant to face WWF champion Stone Cold Steve Austin in a battle of WWF's toughest men. And with Gunn legit KOing the Good Doctor in the ring, all those plans were scrapped thanks to him. Quietly released from the company, Gunn would later have one more match in WWE as he'd return in 2007 for Raw's 15th anniversary Gimmick Battle Royal before retiring from the ring. Number 11. Karma, 2011. In TNA, Awesome Kong was one of the company's top stars, which is why expectations were so high when the former Knockouts champion signed with WWE in 2010. At a time when the company preferred models over actual talent, Karma broke the mold, with promos showing the monster heel destroying Barbie dolls left and right. This attitude continued into her push upon debuting in 2011 as she demolished other divas, but in one of the company's most bizarre moments, Karma randomly broke down in tears after one of her attacks, announcing a week later that she was pregnant. This joyous news secured the end of her push, as Karma would leave for the rest of the year, returning at the 2012 Royal Rumble before leaving the company in July, never having a single one-on-one match as a WWE superstar and leaving a ton of potential. Number 10. Bob Backlund, 1993. A decade after losing the WWF Championship to the Iron Sheik, Bob Backlund returned to the WWE in 1992, though to a very different company. Not long after returning, fans quickly saw that Backlund was out of step with the new generation, as the 44-year-old squeaky clean babyface had plenty of wrestling skill, but absolutely zero charisma. After a highly underwhelming 1993, things did get better for Backlund, as in 1994 he turned into a crazed heel who monologued about the good old days and had plenty of grievances about new, edgy, popular superstars like Razor Ramon and Bret Hart. Winning the WWF Championship from Hart in late 1994, Backlund's new title reign was brief, as he'd lose the gold to Diesel 3 days later in 8 seconds, a time that had become a popular chant amongst fans. Wrestling less and less after this, Backlund would come up short against Bret at WrestleMania 11. Backlund's last televised match would be November 21, 1995 on Raw, again losing to Hart, and after tumbling down the card and later becoming a manager for the likes of the Sultan, he'd quietly disappear from the company in 1997, turning his attention to politics with a failed run for Congress in 2000. Number 9. Buff Bagwell, 2001. One match can make a career and one match can break a career, and in the case of Buff Bagwell, it was definitely the latter. Joining the WWF after WCW's demise in 2001, Bagwell, a 5-time former WCW champion, was given one chance to impress, being booked to face WCW champion Booker T on a July 2001 edition of Raw, a match that also served to showcase what a revitalized WCW could be under WWF's control. Sadly, Buff did not have the stuff on the night, as the match stank up the show. Just 1 week later, Bagwell was fired from the company, who cited attitude issues as just one of several reasons behind the release. Another reason was that his mother Judy, who is somehow a former WCW Tag Team Champion, was pestering the WWF about giving her son a push, and the company had no time for a mama's boy in their ring. Number 8. The Nexus 2010. Yep, in 2010, it wasn't just one superstar that was the most disappointing. It was a whole group. Sure, the group started strong, destroying everything on Raw in their June debut, a moment so controversial it caused WWE to temporarily fire Daniel Bryan. Making life miserable for WWE's roster, especially John Cena, the group were booked strong, culminating in a 7-on-7 match between the Nexus and a team of WWE All-Stars. But at SummerSlam, in a moment he now regrets, Cena forced booking changes, making it so that he almost single-handedly defeated the 7 remaining members, killing all momentum the group had. While Cena would later be forced to join the sinister group of renegades, the SummerSlam loss caused irreparable damage to Nexus's credibility, as fans knew it was only a matter of time before Big Match John would break free and defeat them again. Sure enough, Cena would be gone from the Nexus after the Survivor Series in November and would return to destroying the group by himself, leaving the Nexus to be a shell of its former self before it was truly dissolved a year later. Number 7. Lex Luger 1994. Joining the WWF in 1993, Lex Luger could have been that year's most disappointing star, as his DQ victory over Yokozuna and post-match celebration, despite not winning the WWF Championship, not only made Luger look like an idiot, but cemented his image as not Hulk Hogan. What made this worse is that Luger was a huge star before joining the Federation, being a former WCW World Champion in 1991, defeating the great Barry Windham. If 1993 was bad for Lex, 1994 was even worse for the leader of the Lex Express, despite Luger receiving more chances at capturing the coveted gold, including co-winning the Royal Rumble with the more naturally beloved Bret Hart. After failing in all these shots, Luger was quickly moved to the mid-card, a huge demotion for the man Vince McMahon once thought would be his next hero, before realizing that he lacked Hogan's level of charisma. Perhaps nothing exemplifies his fall from grace more than Luger's 1994 rivalry with Tatanka, as both men accused the other of selling out to Ted DiBiase. And though the WWF wanted fans to think who sold out, the crowd was left wondering, who cares? Number 6. Dean Douglas 1995. When Shane Douglas returned to the WWF in 1995 after years away, he was a much different man than what he had once been. As ECW's foul-mouthed franchise, Douglas had become a huge commodity for the Extreme promotion that Vince McMahon was eager to snatch up. And yet it was McMahon's decision to repackage the franchise as a college educator, further proving that every new generation star needed a side job. We're looking at you, IRS. After Shawn Michaels was unable to defend the Intercontinental title at In Your House 4, Douglas was immediately awarded the gold, but lost the title immediately to Razor Ramon. As if being the cartoonish Dean and having a blink-and-you'll-miss-it reign wasn't bad enough, Douglas quickly made enemies backstage, with the Clique being quick to make his life a living hell. Douglas's departure was equally as messy, as when doctors told Vince McMahon of a serious spasm in the Dean's back, which could have paralyzed him, McMahon tried to pressure Douglas into denying he was hurt, and was told directly by the boss to get out of the company. Leaving on New Year's Day 1996, Douglas returned to ECW that same month, vowing never to work for WWE again, a promise he's kept to this day over 20 years later. Number 5. The Dragon 1991. We all know that Vince McMahon can be petty, but did he bury Ricky Steamboat 4 years after he took a brief hiatus to be there for the birth of his son? That's how it seemed in 1991, when Steamboat returned to the company as The Dragon. Not Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, just The Dragon, of course wearing dragon-themed headgear and breathing fire before matches. Whilst the commentators would occasionally refer to him as a former Intercontinental Champion or mention his WrestleMania 3 match in passing, Ricky Steamboat was never mentioned, as if the name was banned by McMahon. As The Dragon, though, Steamboat enjoyed a series of wins, losing just one match against Skinner on a house show, but the next day, he gave his notice to the company. It's been rumored that Steamboat quit rather than job to The Undertaker, who was working his way up the card, and whatever the reason, fans never saw what Steamboat had to offer in this run. Number 4. Taz 2000. Following in Shane Douglas's footsteps, Taz debuted for the WWF at the 2000 Royal Rumble with a lot of hype after being a beast in ECW. Unfortunately, much like Douglas, the human suplex machine quickly became an afterthought, wallowing in the mid-card and having an embarrassing feud with Jerry Lawler over the summer, which Taz wouldn't even win. By 2001, Taz's star had fallen so far the pint-sized powerhouse was relegated to the voice of the Alliance, a clear sign the company had given up on pushing him, perhaps due to his size. As a commentator, Taz had a much bigger role, where he worked color commentary for years before leaving in 2009, arguably better known for his voice than his fists. In a 2020 edition of AEW Unrestricted, Taz said he left on his own terms after being offered a 3-year contract, and cited Vince McMahon's micromanagement of the commentators as the reason he left and hasn't been back since. Number 3. DDP 2002. One of the biggest stars in WCW, Diamond Dallas Page made history in June 2001 when he became the first WCW star to appear on Raw. Unfortunately, this shocking moment came about because Paige had been revealed as the stalker of The Undertaker's wife Sarah in what was obviously a very uncomfortable feud far beneath both men. Perceived by fans as a creep and being destroyed by the dead man for the majority of 2001, 2002 was not much better for Paige, who feuded for the lowest-tier European Championship before quietly leaving in April. Whilst the company has embraced Paige in recent years, giving the positive one a Hall of Fame ring in 2017, his WWE career was seemingly another case of a WCW star being broken down by Vince McMahon. A real shame considering how Paige got over in WCW. Number 2. Mr. Kennedy 2007. Mr. Kennedy had seemingly everything a WWE superstar could want when he debuted in 2005, and with talent, charisma, and a great gimmick on his side, the Loudmouth was seemingly a surefire world champion, a belief strengthened when he became Mr. Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 23. But a month later, everything changed. After losing the contract to Edge, personal issues and backstage rivals costed Kennedy everything, including a main event push as Mr. McMahon's illegitimate son. As if that weren't bad enough, the role was ultimately given to Hornswoggle, and from there Kennedy would bounce around the brands before he suffered an injury in August 2008, which derailed any remaining plans. Returning on May 25, 2009, Kennedy would be released just 4 days later after Randy Orton claimed that Kennedy injured him during a match, and after the Viper persuaded John Cena to complain to Vince about the Loudmouth, Kennedy was shown the door, with all plans of him being a huge star in the company going up in smoke. Number 1. Finn Balor 2018. Joining the WWE in 2014, Finn Balor was one of NXT's biggest stars, but when his 2016 main roster call-up came, things went downhill. An immediately strong push, Balor defeated Rusev, Cesaro, and Kevin Owens to qualify for the Universal title match at SummerSlam that year, and would defeat Seth Rollins to become the first Universal Champion. An injury during that match meant Balor's reign would last just a day, and when he returned, his luster had all but fizzled out. In 2018, Balor's status was the loser of big matches, lasting nearly an hour in the Men's Royal Rumble but not winning, losing at his first WrestleMania, and also losing at his first Money in the Bank ladder match. This wave of lackluster booking continued for the remainder of the year, and whilst it seemed at one time that his days in the company were numbered, Balor is thankfully doing much better now, back in NXT.